I was standing at the back of the chapel, clutching the folded piece of paper in my trembling hands. The orchids around her casket smelled too sweet, making the air thick, almost suffocating. I watched as my aunt walked to the microphone with confident, fake grief in her voice, thanking everyone for coming. She looked at me once, her eyes cold, victorious, before she turned away. My cousin sat in the front row, avoiding my gaze. I tried to breathe slowly, focusing on the paper in my hands. It contained every word I needed to say. The words Mom whispered to me during her last days in hospice. Words she asked me to share. But when I stood up to walk towards the altar, my uncle placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "Sit down," he whispered with a venomous smile. "Your voice isn't needed today." At that moment, my chest felt hollow. But I didn't cry. I just sat back down, clutching Mom's words against my heart, thinking they had won, thinking silence meant defeat. But they didn't know Mom as I did. They didn't know her plan wasn't over yet. I sat there for the rest of the ceremony, feeling my heart beating so loud it echoed in my ears, drowning out the priest's prayers and my aunt's trembling sobs that sounded so rehearsed. I watched her dab her dry eyes with a silk handkerchief, stealing glances at me with that same look of disdain she always carried. Memories flooded me of how she used to tell Mom I was a disappointment, a burden, a girl who would never be worthy of the Delacroix name. As people lined up to place white roses on the casket, I remained seated, gripping the folded speech so hard my knuckles turned white. I could almost hear Mom's voice in my mind, whispering softly like she did in hospice. "They can't bury my truth with me, darling. Promise me you'll let them hear it." Tears threatened to spill, but I blinked them away, refusing to give my aunt the satisfaction. Suddenly, the lawyer who had been standing quietly at the back walked forward, clearing his throat. Everyone turned to look at him, confused. He held a sealed envelope high and said, "Before we proceed to the burial, Mrs. Delacroix requested her final words be read aloud by her attorney." My aunt's face paled as if she'd seen a ghost. The room fell silent, a thick, uncomfortable silence that pressed down on everyone's shoulders. My aunt shifted nervously, her lips parting as if to protest, but no words came out. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and broke the wax seal with a slow, deliberate motion that made my chest tighten with anticipation. He unfolded the crisp paper, cleared his throat again, and began to read in a calm, steady voice. "To my family gathered here today, and especially to my daughter." At that moment, my eyes burned with tears I refused to let fall. I sat up straighter, listening to Mom's voice come alive through his words. "I know many of you never saw her worth. You tried to break her spirit, convinced yourselves she was weak, unworthy of my love or your respect. But know this. My greatest pride was raising her to be gentle in a world that worships cruelty." A soft gasp rippled through the room. My aunt's hands were trembling now, gripping her purse like a lifeline. The lawyer paused, glanced at me with a brief, warm look, and continued. "I leave her with my blessing, my love, and everything I built. Yes, everything." A stunned murmur spread among the guests. My cousins exchanged worried glances, and my aunt's face twisted into something between rage and panic. The lawyer continued reading, his voice unwavering, slicing through the heavy silence like a blade. "I know many of you expected to inherit what I built. My businesses, my properties, my legacy. But these were never meant for those who live with bitterness in their hearts. They were meant for the one who stayed by my side when I was sick, the one who brushed my hair when my strength failed, the one who made me smile even when death was near." Tears blurred my vision as I remembered those long hospice nights, holding Mom's fragile hand while she slept, whispering stories to distract her from pain. The lawyer paused to let her words sink in before continuing. "To my daughter, I leave everything. May she build a life free from your judgment. May she know her worth is beyond what any of you could ever measure." My aunt let out a strangled sob, her shoulders shaking with silent fury. But I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on the lawyer, feeling Mom's love wrap around me like armor. For a moment, the entire chapel felt like it was holding its breath. I could hear my own pulse pounding in my ears as the lawyer folded the letter with delicate care and placed it back into its envelope. My aunt's eyes were wide with disbelief, her lips moving silently as if trying to form words that wouldn't come. One of my cousins leaned over to whisper something to her, But she shook her head violently, tears of humiliation brimming in her eyes. The guests began to murmur again, shifting in their seats, glancing at me with a new kind of respect they had never shown before. I sat completely still, feeling the gravity of what had just unfolded. Mom had given me more than her inheritance. She had given me my voice back, my dignity, my truth. And in that moment, sitting in the same seat where they tried to keep me silent, I felt taller than I ever had in my life. The lawyer cleared his throat once more and said softly, "That concludes Mrs. Delacroix's final message. She asked that her daughter lead the recessional prayer." My aunt gasped audibly. Slowly, I stood up, holding my mother's folded speech in my hand. I walked to the altar with quiet power. I stepped up to the altar, feeling the cool marble beneath my fingertips as I placed Mom's speech in front of me. The microphone stood there, waiting, and for the first time in my life, I felt no fear of it. I took a slow, steady breath, letting the quiet fill me with strength. My voice came out calm and clear, carrying through the silent chapel. "Thank you all for coming to honor my mother today," I began, glancing at the rows of stunned faces before me. My aunt refused to meet my eyes, staring down at her lap as tears streaked her powdered cheeks. "She asked me to read these words to you, and though I was stopped before, I will fulfill her wish now." I unfolded the paper with trembling but determined fingers. "She wanted you all to know that forgiveness is the greatest freedom, that love remains, even when everything else fades." My voice wavered slightly, but I held strong. "She wanted me to tell you that she forgave every cruelty, every betrayal, every silence that tried to drown her truth, and that she left this world with peace in her heart, because she knew I would rise beyond it all." As I finished reading, the silence that followed felt like a blessing, a quiet space where Mom's words could settle into every heart in the room. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling her presence beside me, warm and calm, like she used to be when I was a child afraid of thunderstorms. When I opened my eyes, I saw the guests looking at me differently, not as the invisible girl they used to dismiss, but as someone unbreakable. My aunt was trembling with silent rage, gripping her purse so tightly her knuckles were white. But I didn't look away this time. I held her gaze, steady and calm, and watched her flinch under the weight of my silence. The lawyer approached me quietly, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder, and whispered, "She was so proud of you." His words almost broke me, but I nodded, swallowing the tears that burned in my throat. As the guests began to rise for the recessional, I stepped down from the altar and walked past my aunt without a single word. For once, it was her who lowered her head in shame, while I walked forward carrying my mother's legacy within me like a shield of light. As I stepped out into the warm afternoon sun, I felt the breeze brush against my face, carrying with it the scent of roses from the cemetery gardens. People were gathering in small groups, whispering softly, casting glances at me filled with questions they didn't dare ask. I walked towards the burial site, each step feeling lighter than the last. For so long, I thought I needed their approval to belong, to feel whole. But in that moment, I realized Mom had given me something far greater, the power to stand alone without loneliness, to walk forward without bitterness. The lawyer walked beside me in silence, holding the folder with the estate documents close to his chest. When we reached the grave, I stood at the edge and watched as the casket was lowered into the earth. My aunt approached, her face tight with forced grief, her eyes red from tears of anger rather than sorrow. She whispered harshly, "You think you've won? You think this changes anything?" I turned to her slowly, feeling no hatred, only clarity. "I don't need to win," I said softly. "I just needed her truth spoken." And for the first time, she had no words to throw back at me. I stood there for a long time after everyone else had left, listening to the quiet rustle of the trees above her grave, feeling the sun warm my skin. I knelt down and placed the folded speech atop the fresh soil, pressing my hand against it as if I could still feel her heartbeat there. "Thank you, Mom," I whispered, "for everything, for believing in me when no one else did. for teaching me that silence can hold more power than 1,000 shouted words. Tears slipped down my cheeks, but they felt light, like a release rather than sorrow. I felt her presence everywhere around me, in the wind that rustled the leaves, in the sun that warmed my shoulders, in the quiet certainty blooming in my chest. When I finally stood up, I felt different, stronger, calmer, more myself than I had ever been. As I walked away, I felt the weight of the inheritance papers in my purse, but they felt insignificant compared to what I was truly carrying. Her blessing, her love, her truth. And I knew, in that moment, that this was just the beginning of the life she always dreamed for me. A life where no one could ever silence me again. The following week was a blur of legal meetings, estate transfers, and cold, silent glares from my family. I sat across from my aunt in the lawyer's office as he explained the distribution of assets. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line, trembling with barely contained fury. As stated in Mrs. Delacroix's will, the lawyer said calmly, the family house, the vineyard, and the business holdings are now fully transferred to her daughter. My aunt let out a strangled sound, half sob, half growl, but she said nothing. She just stared at me with eyes that burned with hatred and desperation. I didn't look away. I sat with my back straight, my hands folded in my lap, breathing steadily as Mom taught me. When the documents were signed, I stood up and turned to my aunt. For a moment, I saw her not as the monster who tried to destroy me, but as a woman drowning in her own bitterness. You don't have to hate me, I said quietly, but if you choose to, it will only destroy you. She blinked, stunned by my calmness, but I didn't wait for her reply. I walked out, feeling the sun on my face, feeling free. The days that followed felt like stepping into a new world I never imagined could be mine. I walked through the halls of the family house, running my fingers along the polished oak banisters, remembering all the times I had climbed them as a little girl, only to be scolded by my aunt for not behaving like a Delacroix. Now, each room felt different, not because it was mine on paper, but because her presence lingered there, quiet, warm, and loving. In her bedroom, I found her perfume bottle half full on the dresser, her favorite shawl draped over the chair, her rosary resting on the nightstand. I sat on her bed and inhaled her scent deeply, letting it fill the emptiness in my chest. For the first time, this house felt like a home, not a battlefield. As I walked into her study, I noticed a small box with my name on it. Inside was a locket with her picture on one side and mine on the other. There was a note folded beneath it. "Carry my strength with you always," it read in her delicate handwriting. I pressed the locket to my heart, feeling tears spill. Quiet, grateful tears. That evening, I sat on the porch overlooking the vineyard as the sun set behind the rolling hills, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The workers were finishing their day, and I watched them move between the vines with practiced ease, their laughter carried softly on the breeze. One of them, an older man named Raphael who had worked for my mother for decades, approached the porch and removed his hat respectfully. "Señorita," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "she would be so proud to see you here." I smiled at him, feeling tears burn my eyes once more. "Thank you, Raphael, for staying by her side, and for staying by mine." He nodded solemnly, his gaze distant with memories. "Your mother built all this with love and sacrifice. Don't ever let anyone take that from you." I nodded, gripping the railing as a wave of determination coursed through me. As the stars began to appear in the indigo sky, I made a silent promise. I would honor her legacy, protect what she built, and live a life so full and dignified that her love would echo through every vine, every room, every breath I took. And in that promise, I felt unbreakable. A few days later, I hosted a small gathering at the house for the vineyard workers and their families, something Mom used to do every spring. As they arrived, bringing homemade breads, tamales, and sweet pastries, I felt the warmth of their presence fill every empty corner of the mansion. Children ran through the gardens laughing, their joy echoing against the stone walls that once felt so cold. I stood in the kitchen, rolling up my sleeves to help serve drinks, feeling at peace. My aunt arrived uninvited, wearing her finest pearls and a rigid smile. She walked through the foyer, looking around as if to remind herself that this place used to be hers to control. When she saw me serving lemonade to a young girl, her face twisted with disdain. "Hosting parties for workers now," she sneered quietly. I turned to her, meeting her glare with calm eyes. "This isn't a party," I said softly. "This is gratitude." Her lips parted, but no words came out. I walked past her with a smile, feeling her bitterness slide off me like water. That day, surrounded by genuine laughter and humble love, I understood what true inheritance meant. Not money, not property, but dignity, compassion, and quiet power. That night, after everyone left and the house fell silent again, I sat in Mom's study, lit only by the small antique lamp on her desk. I opened her old journals, reading page after page filled with her elegant, looping handwriting, stories of her dreams, her secret fears, her triumphs and regrets. One entry caught my eye. "I pray that one day, my daughter will stand strong where I could not, that she will break the chains of fear I could never escape." Tears welled in my eyes as I whispered into the quiet room. "You did, Mom. You gave me everything I needed to be strong." I closed the journal gently, resting my hand on its worn leather cover. Looking around the room, I felt her presence everywhere, not as a ghost trapped in the past, but as a living force within me. I knew my aunt and cousins would never truly accept me, but I didn't need them to. Their approval was no longer my measure of worth. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the moonlit vineyard, feeling a peace settle deep in my bones. This was my home now, my life, and for the first time, I felt completely free. Weeks later, I stood at the edge of the vineyard as harvest began, watching rows of workers move with rhythmic purpose under the rising sun. I wore Mom's shawl draped over my shoulders, feeling its softness anchor me to her memory. As the crates filled with deep purple grapes, Raphael approached me with a proud smile. "Your mother would be proud, señorita," he said, his eyes glistening. I nodded, breathing in the crisp morning air heavy with the scent of earth and ripening fruit. "Thank you, Raphael, for everything." He nodded and returned to work, leaving me alone with the rustle of leaves in the breeze. I thought back to that day in the chapel when they tried to silence me, when my aunt's hand on my shoulder felt like the end. Now, standing here, I understood what Mom meant by silent power. I didn't need to raise my voice to be heard. My life was her final speech, spoken with dignity, kindness, and unbreakable truth. As the sun climbed higher, warming my face, I closed my eyes and whispered, "I hope you see me, Mom. I hope you know. I finally became the woman you always saw in me." And for the first time, I felt her smile within me. Thank you for watching until the end. If you've ever lived through something similar, share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes the loudest impact is made in silence.